Welcome to the Avery Archives on YouTube, where we narrate public domain documents from the Steven Avery case. The following is a narration from day one of the Avery trial, the defense opening statements given by Attorney Strang. All narration is directly from the court records for educational purposes. This is part one.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. This summer, it will be 22 years. 22 years since a woman running on the beach in Manitowoc County was raped and nearly beaten to death. The Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department investigated these awful crimes, and they charged Steven Avery with rape and attempted murder on that Manitowoc beach 22 summers ago. He said consistently that he was innocent, that he had not done it. No one believed him. No one but his own family believed him. And as that case was making its way through the Manitowoc County Circuit Court, just one county over, Teresa Marie Halbach was 5 and was starting kindergarten. Somewhere else, somewhere we don't know, a man named Gregory Allen, presumably, was laughing and planning his next violent rape.
11 years later, in 1996, Steven Avery was trying still to make people understand that he was innocent. DNA testing was in its infancy. It was beginning to move into courtrooms out of scientific laboratories. But we've come a long way, just a few years since 1996, and it was not as advanced as it is today. But in 1996, Steven Avery took a chance, and he had blood drawn, a little vial of blood. It was sent off, through the help of his lawyers, for early DNA testing. It couldn't clear him entirely, it helped, but it did not conclusively prove Steven Avery's innocence of the attempted murder and rape on the Manitowoc beach. And when the tests failed to prove him entirely innocent, that blood was sent back in a box sealed with evidence tape to the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court. And there, in 1996, that blood vial, sealed in the box with evidence tape, took up residence in the now 11-year-old file of the 1985 case, in a box, in the open, in the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court's office. And there it sat. And in 1996 here, just a few miles north of here, Teresa was learning to drive, I assume, at age 16. And the irony is that blood vial in the clerk's office probably is what ends up in her car eventually. And time moves forward through to 2002. Science has also moved forward. DNA testing has improved, and a new effort is made to exonerate Steven Avery. Now the blood in the vial, in the box, under the evidence tape in the clerk's office, is not, you will learn, what is used for the 2002 and 2003 DNA testing. But some materials from that box, that file, the overall file from the 1985 case, some are sent to Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in Madison, to Sherry Culhane, to whom Mr. Kratz introduced you. And the person from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department involved, lo these many years later, the department was but a person from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department who documented the things that were sent from that old court file in the crime laboratory, and therefore presumably looked in the box and assisted in deciding what to send. That person, by that time a lieutenant, or a detective now a lieutenant, named James Link. Now, Detective Link was with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. He had his office in the Sheriff's Department that adjoins, or is connected by a small courtyard, to the Manitowoc County Circuit Court and the clerk's office, just by a small courtyard to the south of the courthouse. He was, as I say, a detective with the Sheriff's Department. Today, he's a lieutenant of the detectives that leads the detective unit. He documented in 2002 what was sent to the State Crime Laboratory from that file. 2002 is the year that Teresa Halbach graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay and came home a short distance back here to Calumet County to start off a promising career. In 2003, nearly a year after the necessary DNA samples were sent, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory were able to establish that Steven Avery did not rape and did not beat that woman on the Manitowoc beach, as he had been saying all along. And because of the advance of science, the crime lab was better and was able to do better than that. It was able to establish that Gregory Allen did it. Now, unfortunately, in that time that had passed, Mr. Allen had raped violently again, because he had his liberty while that man did his time. But in the fall of 2003, as the weather was cooling, the state of Wisconsin long last joined Steven Avery in a motion to set aside his conviction. And an innocent man also went home. Home for Steven Avery? Well, home is the salvage yard, which you've seen now many glorious pictures, from up high, from down low, from angles all over. The pictures are a good deal more glorious looking than the salvage yard itself, but this was home. It's the only home that would take him back after all this time. Alan Avery, Steven's father, back there in the working shirt, just as you might expect. Alan Avery started that business nearly 40 years ago on the 40 acres he had scrimped to buy. He raised sons and a daughter, and they didn't wander far from the business. Chuck and Earl joined it. Barb works elsewhere. She works a factory job but lives on the property. And this is the sort of business where the family you saw shares the perimeter of this property with the 4,000 rusting, decaying cars that are the refuse, the wreckage of other people's lives. This is not a glamorous business, but it's a necessary business. It's a good business. And yes, as you will learn, you've got to get your hands dirty if you're going to be in the salvage business. Not just dirty, you get your hands bloody, because you're working with rusted, jagged metal, disassembling cars. And the dirt that grinds into your palms that you find under your fingernails, it doesn't wash off at night. But this was his family's business, and this was home. And he rejoined his brothers Chuck and Earl and his father Alan, his mother Dolores, on the family's property at the business. He became again one in the Avery clan, one man in the Avery clan, and he tried to resume some normalcy of life, sharing the perimeter of that salvage yard, not in a pretty townhouse on some nice stone foundation, but in a trailer home, down from his sister's trailer home, both of them down from the double wide that Mom and Dad have, and Chuck's trailer toward the back, on the path towards the crusher. And it is, although not glamorous, a worthwhile business, and it's work with its own dignity. What would we do if we didn't have the salvage yards in which to find spare parts? I guess would be reliantly entirely on the big corporations that make the cars, to continue to make spare parts for them and sell them at such price they might see fit. So it would be pretty tough without the Alan Averys and the Steven Averys of the world. It would be pretty tough for the guy who's restoring his 1968 Pontiac GTO hardtop in his garage to do that economically. It would be pretty tough for the guy working on a 1965 Mustang convertible in his spare time to do that. Maybe more importantly, it'd be pretty tough for the woman who's got young kids to feed and a job to hold down and medical bills. And she just has to get another 50,000 miles out of that 1998 Oldsmobile. And for those people, maybe for you, for many of us, it's a good thing that that young woman's father or brother, or maybe even she, can go to that salvage yard and keep that 1988 Oldsmobile running a little while longer. Now, in 2003, when Steven went home, Teresa Halbach also was home. Her photography business was flourishing and things were going reasonably well. In 2004, Steven Avery filed a lawsuit seeking some money for a hole in his life, the time he had spent as an innocent man, for the crimes that Gregory Allen committed. This was a serious lawsuit. It was in federal court down in Milwaukee, And there was no question but that a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and, in the end, the court system had gotten the wrong guy. And as that lawsuit crept forward, as lawsuits do, we came to October 2005. In October 2005, about the middle part of the month, James Lenk and another ranking officer at the County Sheriff's Department, Sergeant Andrew Colburn, Mr. Lenk and Mr. Colburn both were pulled into the lawsuit, not as defendants or parties to the lawsuit, but as witnesses. Witnesses who had their depositions taken in the middle of October 2005. Now, a deposition typically in a civil lawsuit is an event where you get a subpoena as a witness and you normally come to a lawyer's office, the conference room, the library, the lawyer's office. Lawyers from both or all sides are there. A court reporter is there, these days often a videographer as well. And the court reporter swears the witnesses under oath. The lawyers ask questions of the witness under oath and they're recorded. There's no judge. It happens, as I say, typically in a lawyer's office. And these two men, Lenk and Colburn, were witnesses. They were witnesses about their own conduct. Neither had been with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department in 1985. But an event in 1995 or 1996 came up in that lawsuit. And as to that event, both of them were witnesses being questioned about their own activity and conduct with respect to Mr. Avery's imprisonment. By the end of that month, unfortunately, those depositions would begin to matter. And indeed, from the time it was filed in 2004, you will learn, the lawsuit itself mattered. This sort of lawsuit, or the public cry of an innocent man wrongly convicted and imprisoned, has to be, as you'll see here, I think, you have to get into the heads of law enforcement and begin to understand the process of law enforcement. This kind of thing has to be a nightmare for every good law enforcement officer. These folks do not want to put innocent people in prison. They want to put guilty people in prison. And when they get it wrong, when the whole system gets it wrong, there understandably are feelings of shame, of embarrassment, anger, humiliation, conflicting feelings about this. This is a good cop's worst nightmare, made all the more worse by the fact that Gregory Allen, free thanks to Steven Avery being convicted instead, Gregory Allen went on to rape and to beat again. This lawsuit kindled real difficult emotions, and the focal point of those emotions, naturally, was the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, which had investigated the rape many years ago on that Manitowoc beach. And so when, October 31st, 2005, Halloween rolls along, Lieutenant Lenk and Sergeant Colburn not only have the lawsuit to contemplate, but now, within the last 3 weeks, have been made witnesses in it and had their depositions taken. October 31st, 2005 began at the Avery Auto Salvage Yard, much as any workday would. This was a Monday and the yard was open. Not long after 8 o'clock in the morning, about 8:12 in the morning, Steven Avery called Auto Trader. Actually, I think he called it in Hales Corner, Highway 100, down on the southwest side of Milwaukee. He called Auto Trader, as he had done a number of times before, and said, "We need a photographer. We have a car for sale." Now, the car belonged to Barb Janda. The van, the minivan you saw computer images of and actual photographs of, it was there. It was hers. It was for sale. I don't expect there to be any dispute about that. And it was Barb's to sell. The calls about it were Barb's to take. The price was Barb's to dicker or negotiate with people interested in making an offer, so that it was a used van. Steve left B. Janda as the name because that was the name of the seller. But Barb works during a day at a factory in town. She doesn't work at the salvage yard as Steven did. He leaves her telephone number because that's where the phone calls have to go if there's an interested buyer. And this, you will find out, is not at all unusual or sinister. It doesn't involve luring anyone anywhere. There was a car for sale. There were photographs to be taken. And indeed, on that day alone, for Teresa Halbach, with the 3 appointments we know about, this was not the only appointment when the seller of a car was not the person whose name was given to Auto Trader. The Schmidt's car was called in by and listed as an appointment for a Craig Sipple. And that little bit of confusion was quickly cleared up by the police. It wasn't really Sipple's car, it was Schmidt's car, no big deal. But she thought she was going to see a Craig Sipple, not a Steve Schmidt's. She thought she was going to see a B. Janda, I suppose, and not a Steven Avery. But here's what she knew. She knew the address. Steven gave her the address. This is an address, as Mr. Kratz explained to you, and I agree, to which Teresa Halbach had been to a number of times, probably about half a dozen, 5, 6, maybe more times, to take photographs of cars or the trailer for sale. For example, the photograph you saw. She knows the address. She knows where she's going. As you'll see, this isn't a surprise or a secret to her or to anyone else. And at 11:45 that morning, she called Barb Janda's number and evidently left a voicemail message saying she'd be able to get there that day sometime after 2. Now, this Manitowoc County area was Teresa's territory, so to speak, for Auto Trader. This was her freelance work, as I understand, not her main source of income. Her photography studio work, I think, probably was her passion, and this was her side job for a young photographer to generate some more money. She has a territory for Auto Trader. Steven Avery wouldn't necessarily know what her territory is or whether she's the only photographer working it. And sometime close to 2:30, he's obviously getting fidgety. He makes 2 phone calls to her cell phone from his cell phone, and he uses the *67 feature, you'll find out, which, as I understand it, on Teresa's telephone, then no telephone number would come up. It'd come up unavailable or something like that, or blocked. But he's on his own cell phone, and he may not being entirely sure whose number he's calling, he may not want to be giving out a cell phone number. At least the second of those calls goes unanswered. And the time frame, it gets fuzzy here. Mr. Kratz said that this was late afternoon that Teresa arrived, and I'm inclined to agree with that, although it's difficult to nail down. But I think the best evidence you'll hear is that although Teresa Halbach is in the neighborhood of the Zipperers, who are really just, I don't know how far, but not too far down Highway 147, and then south toward Manitowoc a little bit, so they're in the general vicinity. And I think at about 2:15, she's near the Zipperers, trying to figure out exactly where she's going and how to get to the Zipperers to take that photograph of their car. But I think the best estimate we'll get out of this evidence of when she actually arrives on Avery Road, which is that gravel road that leads down towards first Barb Janda's trailer, and then Steven Avery's trailer, which you saw on the north edge of the 40-acre parcel. The best estimate of when she swings her Toyota down that gravel road is probably shortly before 3:30, probably not 2:45, as one of Barb's sons, Bobby Dassey, recalls it. Why do I say the best estimate? Because there's a school bus driver. 2 of Barb Janda's boys, Brendan and Blaine, are still in Mishicot High School, and it's Monday, as I said, and they ride the school bus. And school schedules being what they are, of course, unless there's really terrible weather or something, school lets out at the exact same time every day. The bell rings, the kids run out the door. The bus is going to be leaving about the same time, and the bus drivers will be driving the same route every day. So this bus driver, who's no relation to the Avery family or the Halbachs or anybody else for that matter, just happens to be the school bus driver. Her name's Lisa Butchner. Lisa Butchner, when interviewed by the police, says, about 3:30 when I dropped the Dassey boys off at the head of Avery Road, I looked down that road and I saw a young woman taking a photograph, or photographs, of a van. Now, Butchner isn't actually sure when she's questioned about this, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of that week. But Monday is the day that a young woman would have been taking a photograph of the van down near the end of Avery Road. So she's got a pretty good reason to have a good beat on the time. She's going to know her route. This is something she's doing 5 days a week. And it's about 3:30 that she sees this young woman down the road taking a photograph of the van. Teresa Halbach does her business, and the way this works is the person selling the car then gives the photographer $40. The photographer makes out a receipt for the transaction and typically also offers the customer the current copy or edition of Auto Trader magazine and then leaves. And that's what Teresa Halbach did. Steven Avery last sees her going back out on Avery Road, about to turn left to go back out on Highway 147. Now, somebody clearly sees her later. We don't know who. I don't know where. I don't know when. And I, like Mr. Kratz, don't know why. I do know this, and can tell you that you'll hear this about the evidence. One of the things that photographers who freelance or work for Auto Trader do is to take photographs on appointments that have been set for them through the Auto Trader office. But there's another thing they can do. They can get some money for that, obviously. Some of that $40 goes to the photograph. But there's another thing they can do, and that's called a hustle shot. The hustle shot is exactly that. It's business that the photographer hustles up for herself or for himself. And as an incentive for the photographer to hustle a little bit, thicken the Auto Trader magazine with new customers selling cars or boats or trailers or whatever, as an incentive for their photographers to do that, Auto Trader gives the photographer a little bigger cut on a hustle shot. You're going to learn that Teresa Halbach was good at hustle shots. She drummed up a lot of these. She was likable, she was hardworking, she was good at getting hustle shots. I have no idea. I have no idea at all, and I don't think you will either, unfortunately, whether she had a hustle shot, or 2, or 3, that day or not. It wouldn't have been uncommon, but if in fact she's near the Zipperers at 2:15, as I think is probable from the evidence, she doesn't show up to the Averys until about 3:30, it's possible that there's a hustle shot in there, or I suppose stopping for lunch or something. We just don't know. It's possible that there are hustle shots that are not scheduled through the Auto Trader office after the Avery shoot. Because after all, if we're at 3:30 and there's a good bit of daylight left in the working day, I suppose, but we don't know. What we do know is that someone sees her later.
Due to the length, we've broken the defense opening statements into multiple parts. You've just listened to part 1. Check the description box below for a link to the second part. It gets very interesting. And while you're at it, subscribe to our channel, Avery Archives, as we'll be posting narrations of the entire trial as well as other case files daily. Thanks so much, and head over to part 2. Bye-bye.